Hello, this is Harry Watt, Wood Products Extension, North Carolina State University, and I want to talk this session on a new idea for packing firewood bundles in mesh bags. That's one of the trends that we're seeing in the industry. We've always been wrapping, we've gotten into shrink wrap. Mesh bags seems to have its place in the industry too. And this discussion is trying to find some greater productivity, ways to make it easier on the crew. And what I'd like to do is to go through my slideshow here. It's a short one, and bring this concept out. I've introduced it a couple years ago, and I've had several people talk to me about it, but as far as I know, nobody has tried it. So that's what I want to do. So here we go. We're going to share the screen. We're going to do our slideshow from the beginning, and this is it. This is the 2021 National Firewood Workshop, June 9th and 10th, 2021. Our funding comes from the Wood Education Center of Princeton, West Virginia, which is a U.S. Forest Service unit. We're working, our cooperative host is the Tennessee Division of Forestry. We have other cooperators in media, including Sawmill Magazine, and also the Virginia Division of Forestry and the North Carolina Forest Service. This grant is given to us in order to promote better processing and marketing of wood and firewood. And should there be any complaints of any kind, you can contact the U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, and North Carolina State University. The things that we get into when we pack a lot of time in firewood, it's not a very pretty operation. A lot of times we spend a lot of money out in the yard with our dry kilns and processors, but we don't have good facilities and buildings, and we don't have good equipment for our packaging. And a lot of times we've gone through different types of packaging, whether it's stretch wrap, shrink wrap, mesh bags. But I think the trend that we're going to see for a while is going to be our mesh bags. So I wanted to come up with something better, and I have in the past worked as industrial engineer in the furniture industry. So I know what value added and non-value added labor is. So I wanted to come up with a concept that would eliminate as much as the non-value added labor as I could. A lot of times in packing bundles, we tend to either go the route of just having our crew working individually. And a lot of times the crew likes it because they deal with it by themselves, and they have a target number of bundles per day, and away they go. Other times we're trying to get some productivity gains by setting up a production line. And if we're not careful, we actually don't have the productivity in a production line that we have individually unless we do it right. One of the challenges we have as we try to get high bundle counts in an operation is we keep running faster and faster. And sometimes if you have a belt conveyor where the wood is coming down the conveyor, the people pick it up and bundle it. If we're not careful, we end up having a very stressful place. And one of the ways we can lower the stress level is to work on both sides of that line. So if you're in an operation that's running 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 bundles per day, you really don't want to say, okay, I'm going to do that high number divided by the number of days. And we typically think in manufacturing 420 work minutes per shift. So 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 divided by 420 is a pretty high bundle count per minute. So if you work off of a belt line on each side, you can reduce that number by half, and it makes the stress level go down. So that's a better alternative than working on one side. A lot of times you push it up against the wall, you work in the middle, but if you pull it out from the wall and work on both sides, you can slow the work pace down to something that's more reasonable. The alternative that I'm bringing up is taking an idea from the lumber industry, which is the turntable. And in the lumber industry, when we're ripping and chopping lumber, we often between work centers would have the lumber cut up, dropping on this table that's slowly going in a circle. and then the crew would not be directly coupled, not like I have to cut a board and I hand it to you. It goes on the table, so each person is working at their own pace, and that puts slop in the system and makes both employees work in a better work environment, and plus they can work faster. So what I come up with is I take an 8 to 12 foot diameter turntable. It's a standard sawmill industry item. You can find them on the used market. It's a gearbox, some kind of a shaft, some way to hold the table up, and then wood would fall on it and it would slowly spin. And it may go 5 to 10 feet a minute. They're fairly slow, and you can adjust the speed, especially either with gears or a variable drive. So I would think you would want to put a cone in the center of it and drop the wood on the top of the cone. That would help push the wood to the out perimeter so people don't have to reach to the middle to get it. So around the perimeter, there's a circle that spins where the every 2 foot there's a bag silo, and the silo would be like a trash can with the bottom cut out, and we would put the mesh bag up like you're putting on your pants, and then there'd be a hook or a clamp that would hold the mesh bag in place. So this would slowly go by, and each employee that's working around this turntable packing circle would stand still. The wood comes to the person, and the inner circle and the outer circle would both move slowly, one going in one direction, one going other. What's good about this with the cone moving is it's bringing new wood to the crew without the crew having to walk around to get it. So that's one of the non-value added is the person, you eliminate the person have to move to get the wood they want. And when you do bundles, you're always picking wood to go a certain place in the bundle, whether it's a quarter, a corner, or a middle. So the first person in the group puts the bag up the trash can on the silo. So if you looked into the bag, all you're going to see is the side of the trash can other than the bottom. And this thing is hanging on the bag, but it's also sliding on a shelf that could be sheet metal, it could be formica over plywood, so it's slick. So it's going to slowly move 5 or 10 feet a minute, whatever's the proper thing for the production rate. They're on 2 foot centers. So as the wood goes by and the bags go by, there's 1, 2, or 3 people putting wood in the bags. And as it goes around, eventually you get to where the bag is done. So the last person that puts the last stick in is going to unhook off the hooks that mesh bag, and it's going to slide around. So the next thing that's going to happen is that shelf ends at a certain point, and underneath it is a slow moving conveyor that's going to take that bag and drop it over at the pallet person. And the pallet person's going to take it. If it's not already been tied up, they tie it up. If it needs a label, they put a label in it, and then it goes on the pallet as required. So what this does, it eliminates several things that any other way you have to do. So if you're wrapping individually, when you get it wrapped, you got to pick it up and do something with it, which could be a pallet or it could be a conveyor. But see, it drops off of the circle automatically. The silos, by having the slick sides, eliminates the stick wood sticking in the bag, and that's the #1 problem with mesh bags. So the crew focuses only on putting wood in the bag. And how cool is that? So here's a drawing of it. So what we're showing is the firewood transfer conveyor is bringing wood from the dumping of the baskets, and there should be a shaker conveyor before this belt conveyor to even it out. So the wood is slowly coming at a steady speed onto the cone. When it hits the cone, it's going to slide down based on what's already there. So the people on the perimeter don't have to reach very far. And these turntables, they can be any diameter that makes sense, but there's a lot of them out in the used market, 8, 10, 12, whatever feet in diameter. If you're on 2 foot centers, you can count the number of baskets by taking the perimeter divided by 2. And if you look at the drawing, you see there's a shelf, and the bag would be pinned there, and the last person who put the last stick in would take it off the pins. It's going to go right over and fall down on in that hole. Now, the person who takes it off can tie it off. They can put a label in it, ever what makes sense for the operation. But the whole idea is this thing runs steady. You don't have to stop the perimeter. You don't have to stop the inside. If you got variable speed and you got different crew sizes for different days, well, you can adjust how quickly the wood comes in and how quickly the bundles go off. So I put this out about a year or two ago. I think it has merits working in a circle versus working on a belt, a straight belt. One of the problems in a straight belt is you're always trying to pick wood for the bundle, and sometimes by the time it gets to the end and it normally would go into a trash conveyor to exit the building, there may still be some wood in there that just didn't get in a bundle because it wasn't the right piece. It was too big, too small, round, square, whatever. So that's what we're doing in the bundle business. We've got to have smart people doing our bundles. We got to make the bundles exactly right. And that means knowing how to do it plus having access to the wood. So the great thing about this is the person stays still. And if I don't use every piece of wood the first time it goes by, it's there the second time. So I think there's some really good merit here. So if anybody would like to talk about this, I'm happy to talk about it. If you want a drawing, I'll send you a drawing. As far as I know, nobody has tried this, but I think it has some merit. It's something we ought to look at, especially if you're trying to save some money on your bundles and make a better working environment for the crew. I think, at least from my viewpoint with my past industrial engineering experience, is it makes sense. It's something we really ought to look at. And I appreciate you catching this in the National Firewood Workshop 2021. Thank you. And there's my contact information.